So, is the church just an optional club you can join, or is it something way more essential, like a family? That's the big question we're diving into today, and we'll be exploring it through a teaching from Dr. Joshua Nichols of Faithful to the Word Ministries. We're going to see what the Bible actually has to say about it. By the way, Faithful to the Word is a 501c3 ministry, so if you want to find more great resources or maybe support their work, you can do that at faithfultotheword.com. All right, let's get into it. You've probably heard this before, right? I love Jesus, but I don't need the church. Heck, maybe you've even felt that way yourself. And it's a really common sentiment in our culture, especially when people have been hurt or have seen things that just don't seem right. It's easy to think, I'll just have my own personal faith, without all the baggage. And that often comes from a really sincere place, but it does raise a pretty critical question. And that's the real question we're asking today. Is that idea, that you can have Jesus without the church, is that actually a biblical one? Because when you really start digging into the New Testament, you find something kind of shocking. It never, not even once, shows a Christian trying to live out their faith all alone. So let's figure out why this idea of a freelance Christian is just so foreign to the Bible. Okay, so first things first, we have to get this straight. Misunderstanding the church isn't just some small little error in theology. From a biblical point of view, it's actually a huge deal that gets right to the heart of our relationship with Jesus himself. I mean, just think about this for a second. Can you imagine walking up to a groom on his wedding day, looking him in the eye and saying, "Hey man, I love you, but I absolutely cannot stand your bride"? I mean, what an unbelievable insult. Well, the Bible over and over again calls the church the bride of Christ. So when we say we love Jesus but we can't stand his church, biblically speaking, we are insulting the groom by rejecting the very bride that he loved so much that he died for her. All right, so if the church isn't just a building or a meeting we can either take or leave, then what exactly is it? To get the real answer, we've got to go back to the original language. Well, the word used in the New Testament is ecclesia, and this word has absolutely nothing to do with stained glass or steeples. It means an assembly, or even better, the called out ones. The church is the group of people God has called out from the world and brought together into a brand new community. And this is huge. The church isn't a place you go, it's a people you're a part of. Now, the Bible actually talks about the church in two different but super important ways. First, you've got the universal church. Think of that like the entire family tree of every believer who has ever lived. It's massive. But then there's the local church. And that's more like the family dinner table, a real, visible group of believers meeting in a specific place. The family tree shows you the incredible scale of God's family, but it's at the dinner table where you get to know each other, where you find support, and where you're held accountable. The Bible is clear, you need both. And this leads to a really massive point. The church wasn't some human idea or an afterthought from God. No way. It is absolutely central to his eternal plan. This whole thing isn't our project, it's his. Just listen to this foundational promise from Jesus Christ himself. Notice who's doing the work here. Jesus says, "I will build my church." This isn't some human organization that could just fall apart. It's a divine project with a divine guarantee. So let's really break that down because there's so much packed in there. Christ is the architect and he's the builder. It's his work, not ours. And the church is built on this rock-solid foundation of who he is, the Messiah, the Son of God. And that last part, the gates of Hades will not overpower it, that's not a defensive statement. It's offensive. It means the church is the one kicking down the gates of hell with the good news, and hell itself has no power to stop it. So what's the mission of this unstoppable force? The Apostle Paul puts it this way: the church is the pillar and support of the truth. Think about that. In a world where truth feels like it's shifting and changing every 5 minutes, God designed his church to be the one institution that holds up his unchanging truth for the whole world to see. Okay, so we get what the church is, we get that it's God's big plan, but so what? Why does it actually matter for you and me today? Why can't we just do this Christian thing on our own? Well, the Bible gives us at least 4 reasons that are pretty much non-negotiable. First up, our own spiritual growth. God's plan is to make us more like Jesus in community, not in isolation. Second, accountability. And that's not about being bossed around. It's about having people who actually know you and love you enough to say, "Hey, you're drifting a bit." It's a spiritual safety net. Third, it's where we worship together and practice the sacraments. And finally, the church is the engine of mission. The Great Commission to make disciples wasn't given to a bunch of individuals. It was given to the church, together. Here's a great way to think about it. Imagine a campfire. If you pull a single glowing hot coal out of the fire and set it by itself, what happens? It goes cold, fast. It's the exact same for us. A Christian who separates themselves from the warmth and fellowship of the church will find their faith growing cold. We need each other to stay spiritually alive. So really, it all comes back to this simple, powerful idea. If you love Jesus, you have to learn to love what he loves. And the Bible couldn't be clearer that he loves his church. So this brings us to the final and most practical question. What on earth does this mean for us?
First, we've got to totally adjust our expectations. The church is not a museum for displaying perfect, polished saints. Not at all. It's a hospital for sinners, filled with broken people who are all being healed by the great physician. When we see it that way, it's a lot easier to be patient and gracious with each other's flaws. Because, hey, we're all works in progress.
You know, our culture just loves the idea of the rugged individual, right? The lone wolf. But spiritually speaking, that's an incredibly dangerous idea. Think about it. A sheep that wanders away from the flock and the shepherd isn't being free. It's putting itself in mortal danger from predators. There is safety, there is protection, and there is nourishment inside the flock of God. And that brings us to the final and maybe most important shift in perspective. We need to see the church with eternal eyes. I mean, when you look at a sculptor chipping away at a block of marble, it just looks messy, right? There's dust and rough edges everywhere. But the sculptor sees the masterpiece that's emerging. Christ is the sculptor of his church. We might see the mess right now, but he sees the glorious, spotless bride he is creating for himself. So at the end of the day, it really comes down to this. Love Christ? Then you've got to love his church. You can't separate them. It might be messy, it might be imperfect, but it is his beloved bride, the pillar of his truth, and our spiritual family. If you want to go deeper on this, please head over to faithfultotheword.com. You can find more teachings there, and if you feel led, you can support their ministry with a donation. And while you're there, be sure to check out Dr. Nichols' new book, Between Two Trees. We really hope this has given you a fresh perspective on the absolute beauty and necessity of the church.